Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DePIN podcast. I'm Tom Trowbridge, the host, and I am thrilled to be here with Mark, co-founder of Aethir. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Aethir, Singapore, Asia-based compute protocol that has basically just launched and now has the largest amount of hardware on its network of any compute protocol out there. And so for those in the US who haven't heard of Aethir, it has some top tier US investors, but also a heavy Asia focus, which is why it may not have been as high profile initially. But with a 3 billion fully diluted market cap and thousands of GPUs online, everyone's going to know about it very soon if they don't already. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Tom. Pleasure to be here. Really, really cool to be chatting with you.
Listen, talk to us about first. Give us the quick summary of Aethir. What is it? What are you using it for? Tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, often I find the best way to explain it is to go through a little bit of the problem we solve, right? Because we're infrastructure, you're infrastructure too. Often it's pretty difficult to explain to people what infrastructure projects do without giving them some clarity on the problem that we solve, right? So I think I'll start there. For many people in your audience, I'm sure they've heard that there is this global compute scarcity, right? Huge amount of difficulty out there for AI companies, particularly startups and small to medium-sized enterprises, to access critical GPU compute. And it only seems to be getting more difficult, right? And that's where Aether kind of steps in. That's a problem that we're addressing. We took a deep look at that issue and kind of broke it down into maybe four pieces that we think are primarily driving that scarcity. The first is, of course, massive amounts of buy pressure from the biggest tech companies in the world. You've got Google, Microsoft, OpenAI. They're all purchasing huge amounts of this compute. Zuckerberg's coming out and buying almost $11 billion worth of H100 GPUs in one hit, right? That's an incredible amount of buy pressure that a limited amount of supply needs to address within the market, right? So that's one critical issue, right? The second is obviously the supply itself. Nvidia, despite being the biggest company in the world, can only produce so many chips a year. And there's currently not enough chips being produced to meet demand. Thirdly, and I think you'll probably be aware of this, LLM complexity, right? So when we talk about AI, you often hear the phrase large language model or LLM for short. As they get more complex, as we go from ChatGPT 3 to ChatGPT 4, we're actually seeing an exponential rise in the compute requirements to serve and to produce those later stage models, right? But within that same time frame, we're not seeing exponential increases in compute or exponential advancements in compute architecture, right? So there seems to be this growing gap between where we need to be to serve these later stage models and how much compute we have today. But the main issue that Aether addresses is this fourth issue, which is that actually we're pretty poor managers of these critical resources, right? We're pretty inefficient in how we manage GPU resources as a whole, right? We took a look at data center, enterprise grade GPU resources in data centers across the US, for example. And often these highly expensive resources are sitting underutilized, almost 80% of the time. So we thought to ourselves, if we could create this infrastructure layer that allowed us to give these underutilized pieces of infrastructure the ability to connect and then be surfaced in front of this kind of global compute demand ecosystem, that would be a meaningful thing to do, right? That would be a meaningful amount of supply we could redistribute into the market and offer it in a very, very kind of different way, right? It's a very different business model in DePIN where you don't own the hardware, right? You have different unit economics, you have different scalability, right? It's a very, very different beast, and in many ways is much more efficient than kind of centralized solutions. So with that in mind, what Aether is essentially a GPU marketplace, but we don't own any of the GPUs, right? We allow GPUs to connect to our infrastructure and we surface them, make them visible to this global compute marketplace. And then compute buyers from all over the world, enterprise compute buyers, have the ability to access that compute, and they do so through the Aether network.
Awesome. And so decentralized GPU network, Talk to us about scale. I've seen some big numbers in terms of the number of H100s and other machines you've got connected to the network right now.
Yeah, so we have about 43,000 enterprise grade GPUs connected into Aethir's network. And what's interesting about Aether is we are 100% enterprise grade, right? So we don't aggregate any consumer equipment. We made a pretty difficult choice early on, right? We came from, and I'm sure I'll touch on this later, but we came from a cloud gaming infrastructure background, right? Building GPU cloud for cloud gaming companies. And those customers all have very, very strict requirements, right? If no one's going to whinge more than a gamer if there's lag or stutter or jitter in their service, right? So meeting those customer requirements is something you can only do with enterprise grade infrastructure, right? And we, when we were coming into the DePIN space, really wanted to be able to serve that type of customer. We felt that was a differentiator that we had, the ability to build networks that serve this type of customer. So we made the choice to only aggregate and integrate enterprise grade equipment. So when you hear this number, this 42,000 GPUs or 43,000 GPUs, wherever it kind of sits on a day-to-day basis, every single one of them is sitting in a data center or connected to enterprise grade network infrastructure, which is really cool. It gives us this kind of great synergy between the type of compute that our customers need and the type of compute the market needs and the type of compute that we're able to provide. From an H100 perspective, we're at about 3,000 H100 systems connected to our network at the moment, which is massive, right? It's more than any other provider in Web3 by a significant margin.
Well, listen, I love the enterprise kind of component there, and I think that one of the I guess one of the things people automatically associate with DePIN is consumer infrastructure, right? And that's terrific. It actually enables most DePIN projects, right? It enables Demo for cars, enables Helium for Wi-Fi, enables all these models, right? But if you're working on mission critical compute or storage, you need to have the level of reliability. And you also see over the course of most crypto, Bitcoin mining, I say the example all the time, start off with retail people's basements. It's now completely institutionalized with public companies running data centers, right? So you've just gone straight to that point. And I kind of think that's critical for adoption because you have to be able to articulate that this is hardware is reliable. And Fluence, we started off with 6 top tier data centers because one of the things we heard when we were out there talking to investors, people aren't going to rely on compute that comes from retail. And so we said that just because it's DePIN doesn't mean you're necessarily using consumer devices. And so 100%. I think that is the same concept that you guys obviously discovered from the very beginning, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that, we're in a more evolved crypto ecosystem now, right? We're looking for projects that are actually integrating real business. We're looking for projects that are building real businesses within the space, utilizing really cool technology, like the technology that Fluence has, like the technology that Aether has, to solve real world problems and as a result have real world customers. And I think that building from an enterprise kind of base gives you that ability. And the great thing about kind of crypto or the great thing about, being an innovative company is just because you make one of those decisions early on doesn't mean you can't find other ways to involve consumers, right? So at Aether, we did a node sale, right? So we have different kind of participants within our ecosystem. We have, of course, the GPU owners, which are primarily these big H100 GPUs or other big enterprise grade GPUs that sit in data centers. Extremely unlikely that the average retail consumer is going to own one of these pieces of equipment, right? So they're kind of somewhat excluded from that role within our network. So we looked and we said, okay, what are other meaningful roles within our network that are maybe less compute or hardware intensive that we could look at bringing, people into? And that's where this kind of node sale concept came from, right? So we took a look at the role. We call them a checker, right? So within our network, essentially there's a policeman, right? The policeman goes out and it's constantly pulse checking the network. It's checking, okay, you tell us you're an H100, are you actually an H100? You tell us you're doing this work, are you actually doing that work? Right? Oh, you say you did the work, did you record it correctly to the blockchain? Right? It's not a compute intensive task, but it's a critical task. It's mission critical, as you say, right? So we looked at that and we said, hey, how about we give the community access to that role, right? So what we did was we structured a node format around. We gave people the ability to operate these independent nodes. They can run on an average computer. Any device can essentially be a node, right? And we opened a door for consumer and retail adoption within our network, where they're doing very meaningful work and they're able to get rewards as a result of it. So roughly 15%, exactly 15% of our total token supply is distributed across these checker nodes, which are all retail. So retail doesn't operate the high performance GPUs, but retail does offer essentially the police force within our network. So the separation of police and state, which I think is really cool within the philosophy of Web3.
Yeah, that's a terrific way to engage the community. And so that's a terrific way to architect your network and to provide those incentives. But that actually is a great transition into token economy, because you mentioned 15% go to checker. So can you walk us through kind of the token economics and how they're all set up?
Yeah, so Aether has 42 billion tokens in total supply. 50% of those tokens are allocated to the community. And by community, we mean people operating and running machines and contributing to that kind of piece of the network, right? So of that, we have essentially three primary functions or three primary roles. The first, which I just spoke about, is, and this is not in order of importance, by the way, this is just the roles. We have the checkers or the nodes, right? They are responsible for policing the network. They're responsible for managing and ensuring there's no bad actors taking advantage of the network. We're not getting cyber attacked. We're not having people faking the type of GPU that they're contributing to the network to earn more rewards. So checkers have 15% of total token supply, right? Which leaves you with 35% left, right? Of that, 23%, right, is allocated to the Aether Edge, right, which I'll talk about in a second, but I got, sexy little box here. And the Aether Edge is, again, another way that we involve retail. And this is a consumer mining device. We partnered with Qualcomm. It's got their latest AI chip inside, and it can sit in your home, plug in, and operate as an enterprise-grade node within our network. So 23% of supply is going to the Aether Edge, and the remainder goes to our high-performance compute network, right? So the H100s, the other IDC-related GPUs that are sitting in, enterprise-capable infrastructure ready for work within our network. So that's pretty much at a high level the breakdown. Do you want me to get into kind of like some of the token flows and
yeah, for sure,
some of the cool things? All right. So one of the kind of probably the coolest piece, the coolest little loop, right, that we have that I think is just really kind of quite elegant, right, is the loop attached to when someone buys compute, right? So let's say you're buying compute within our network. You go to our website. There's essentially a big menu, like you're ordering dinner, right? You say, okay, I want this compute, right? This GPU, and here's the price, right? So the first thing you do, of course, because we're in Web3, is you have to have the ATH token, right? I'm assuming when you buy compute or buy services within Fluence, you also probably have to do it with the Fluence token. Is that right?
Actually, we're abstracting that away. It's a different thing. We actually want to have
model,
fiat-based thing, but we can get into that afterwards. But
yeah, I'd love you to tell me how that works. That'd be really cool to hear. Okay, in Aether, you have to buy the token, right? You buy the token, and essentially the price on that menu is the price that the owner of the GPU set, right? So if I own the H100, maybe I set a price, okay, $4 per hour, right? And that price goes on the menu, and then the buyer says, okay, $4 is a good price to me. they buy the token and they pay $4 worth of token into the network, right? And when that kind of token enters the network, 20% gets taken by the network, right? That's our kind of operational cost as an ecosystem, and 80% goes to the compute owner, right? So the person who owns the GPU. But here's where it gets interesting, right? We also layer on top of that a reward that comes from the treasury, and we call that a proof of work reward. So we have the service fee, which is the price paid by the buyer, and then we have the proof of work reward, which sits on top of that service fee. So as a owner of that GPU, I get 80% of the service fee, and then I get the treasury reward on top. Now, how does a network value a token? Well, in DePIN, it's generally some form of representation of like how much compute is contributed to the network, how much business is the network doing, what's its utilization rate, what's the value of the work that's happening within that ecosystem, right? Well, here, all of a sudden, you've got a price, and $4 might be a market price, right? So if I charge $4 and then I get a proof of work reward on top, I'm getting bonus rewards. So if I want, as a compute owner, to have higher utilization, right, I'll reduce my price to the market. I might charge $3, but that's okay, because all of a sudden I'm still getting that reward from the treasury, right? So now all of a sudden the price is lower, so more buyers come into the market. They're like, okay, that price is really sexy, right? I'm going to get more compute from that. So then as a compute owner, your utilization rate goes up, right? And what happens when your utilization rate goes up? Other compute owners look and they go, oh shit, if I put my GPU there, right, I'm going to get higher utilization. I'm going to join that network. So what happens? The network starts valuing the token higher, right? Because all of a sudden, instead of having 2 GPUs, you've got 10 GPUs, right? So token price is essentially, people would assume that the token price would go up, right? So effectively, the proof of work that you're getting from the treasury also proportionally increases, because you've got 2 tokens coming in. And if those tokens are only worth $1, you're getting $2. But if now they're worth $1.50, right, you're getting 3. So you can discount your price even more to market, right? So now you're $2, right? And again, you have this really cool virtuous loop built on the way that DePIN projects value ecosystems, right? The number of essentially compute providers and the utilization rate of that compute. And it's a really, really cool mechanism that you can only really do when you have a token, right? I think a lot of projects look at a lot of like Web 2 companies look at like what's happening in Web 3, and they're like, well, why would you do that in Web 3, right? And I think the easy answer there is, well, if I do it in Web 2, I have the same GPUs, I have the same data centers, I have the same, subsea cables, I have the same infrastructure, everything's the same. But if I do it in Web 3, I have a couple of extra levers that I can pull. And if you're smart about it, how you pull them can be, pretty meaningful.
Super interesting. So a couple of questions for you. So if I set my GPU price at $4, does that reset? Is that a live kind of oracle to know how many Aether tokens, how many ATH that is equivalent to? So I drop it to 3, the price goes up. That is obviously reset regularly, right?
Yeah, that's right. So it's a fiat, essentially a fiat peg price that's live.
Fair enough. And then is the reward, the sort of the proof of work reward, is that a fixed amount of tokens that's divided among every operational GPU, or is it a amount of tokens per live GPU per job?
It's a little bit of both, right? So if you take like a very big picture approach, certain amount of emissions happen over a certain period of time, right? But if you look at actually the work that's actually being conducted, right, you're only getting proof of work rewards when you're doing the work, and certain work is rewarded differently, right? So the work that you're doing and the proof of work rewards that you're getting are determined by the type of work, the type of GPU, and kind of how the network values your contribution.
So it is a combination then, I guess, of,
yes,
if there were, just to make it easy, if there were 2 GPUs doing work at the moment, would they each get the same reward, or would it be one reward that was split among them, between them?
They would get individual rewards for the work that they're doing.
Fine. And
So
so
there would be
one joining wouldn't reduce the reward of the other.
no.
Fair enough. Interesting. Okay. That is what effectively that the token economy effectively subsidizes the GPU providers and should result in a virtuous cycle of increased subsidization as usage grows, right? So then you
Right.
will presumably be by far the lowest cost GPU provider as this cycle kind of keeps going, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's the token helps you bootstrap this network, which is one of the great things about token economies.
And then does that token extra, that proof of work reward, continue in perpetuity? Does it trail off over time, or is that 20% that you're taking go to replenish that subsidy and reward down the road?
Yeah, so there's a replenishment. There's a couple of different replenishment loops, but we're a deflationary token, right? There's only a certain number of tokens out there. There's only 42 billion. There's not going to be any more, right? So we do have an emission schedule where the token depletes over like a 20, 25-year period. But there are absolutely these replenishment buyback loops that we have within the ecosystem that will allow us to kind of extend these mechanisms as well.
Fair enough. And so then the key, I guess, is that you want to, but it's deflationary. There's not a burn mechanism, right? So it's deflationary in that. How is that deflationary versus just this fixed 42 billion that is
just
sort of
fixed
amount?
Just
fixed.
Not inflationary.
Fair enough. Super interesting. Well, then I guess, love to hear about the shift gears for a second, because I think that's a really interesting token economy. And I guess the other point is that as people model it, they can model, I think there'll be this many GPUs on, and the price will be lower, so more people will be likely to use it, which will then drive more GPUs to be on it. On that topic, actually, while I remember, I think you guys are a Nvidia partner. And so talk about that, because that's also a, rare for a protocol to be at such a kind of early stage in launching, to be partners with one of the largest companies in the world. So talk about what that means, how it happened. It's a terrific kind of partnership to have.
Yeah, I think we were quite lucky, right? Early on, actually, our CTO has very strong relationships with Nvidia. A lot of the team actually does come from a world where we've been working very closely with Nvidia, being a cloud gaming centric business, right? So we came into Aether with these relationships. Also, to be fair, when you're building and again, Aether does AI based GPU cloud, but we also do gaming based GPU cloud, right? For the cloud gaming side, and happy to talk about gaming versus AI within our network. But particularly when you're building, again, enterprise grade equipment, enterprise grade infrastructure with gaming GPUs, you need to have a very close relationship with NVIDIA. So you have access to the latest drivers, the latest software, right? You can speak to certain people within the organization to get assistance and help when you're doing, kind of cutting edge stuff. So there are doors and pathways that you can kind of knock on or go through to get an early partnership with NVIDIA. But I will say in general, they're quite allergic to crypto, right? I think they've been burned so hard by miners and scalpers in previous cycles that they don't generally like dipping their toes in the water in crypto world. So we were, as you say, just really lucky that we had some strong relationships there we could leverage.
And what does that mean? Does that allow you? What are the benefits of that partnership?
There's an ecosystem, right? So you're in the Inception program. You get exposed to other projects that are in the Inception program. You, again, have direct kind of relationships to developer resources and early access to drivers that would, otherwise be sitting behind a paywall or would be quite difficult to get a hold of. There's the NVIDIA Venture Partner Program, where they try and help you raise money through their venture capital network and group of kind of investors that are plugged into their ecosystem. And it's a BD opportunity too for companies that are kind of strong within Nvidia's ecosystem. So a lot of upside. No silver bullets or magic weapons kind of in there to kind of skip steps, but definitely a helpful playground to have access to.
No doubt, no doubt. And terrific to have, and just helps with adoption. And whenever you're talking to any other kind of Web2 enterprise, to be a partner with NVIDIA is obviously huge. What in terms of one other thing on token economics, if your GPU is not being used, are there rewards for being on the network, or are you waiting for use to have rewards?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we have what's called proof of capacity, right? So again, hopefully not getting too deep that I lose people, but if you kind of look at the totality of Aethir's rewards, right, and their distribution over time, right, that line is very stable, right? We try and give our partners, our contributors to the network, a very stable understanding of their 5-year horizon, right? Their 10-year horizon. We don't ever want this kind of volatility that encourages people to take their hardware out of your ecosystem and go deploy it somewhere else because, today things are higher in this network and then, okay, that's pumped and dumped and now I'm going to go deploy it somewhere else, right? So stability of token reward within our ecosystem is kind of critical and something we've optimized for as best we can. And one of the ways that we addressed this was these two specific reward structures. One is the proof of work reward, which I spoke about before. And the other is this proof of capacity reward, which you're alluding to now, right? So the proof of work reward scales alongside the growth curve, right? It scales alongside utilization. So it starts low when your community is smaller, when there's less compute, right? Because there's less people conducting work. And as a result of that, there's less drawdown from the treasury. So it's kind of like a curve that goes like this, right? But within infrastructure networks, at least it's our opinion that you need to be supply led, right? You need to be supply first and you want to have demand kind of constantly behind it. You don't really want to be in a situation where you're turning demand away, right? You want to kind of have just this significant, but not too significant amount of supply that's ahead. So that means that at some point early on, you're going to have this chicken and the egg scenario that you need to overcome, right? Where you want supply in the network, but supply is going to be like, well, you can't give me any work, so why am I going to be here? Like, why would I join your network for nothing, right? When I could just join a more stable network somewhere else. So this is where these kind of idle rewards come in. And we call it a proof of capacity reward. Effectively, it's a reward that you get if your GPU is sitting in our network, available for work, and proving that it's not doing work somewhere else, right? We're not here to let you double dip, right? You have to prove that you're available for work at the drop of a hat and you're not doing work somewhere else. And if you do that, and by the way, checkers are critical for this. The checkers are the ones that are checking to ensure, right? Sending them essentially fake tasks, sending them little work requests, right? Ensuring that they're available. If you're available, you qualify for a proof of capacity reward. And this reward scales in the opposite direction, right? It starts high and then rapidly drops off, right?
Because
so
you want
have
capacity in the beginning, obviously.
Exactly. So you want to reward idle capacity in the beginning to pull people in, to bootstrap that initial network, right? But you don't want that, freebie there forever, right? So this one scales inverse to growth, which I think is really cool. The proof of work reward scales with growth. And then you have effectively this kind of stabilized reward mechanism that sits as kind of a combination of those alongside, some other mechanisms as well. But long answer to your question, we have a proof of capacity reward.
Super interesting. I mean, it's also funny. We tried to solve those problems at Fluence, but did it differently, where we did dollar-based rewards dependent in paid in the Fluence coin. So we basically on the CPU side, not GPU, $10 per core per month paid in FLT. And so we're trying to optimize because of the tokens price. We're always worried about providers having enough rewards to cover their fiat costs. So that's problem one we wanted to solve. And you obviously grasp that. The other issue is what we've learned is that if the value of rewards spikes so much, people may not be interested in actually doing the work. And so the converse thing for us is that actually you get fewer tokens as the price goes up because we don't want to incent people to just milk in rewards, right? And so we've seen some ecosystems where that has actually provided the negative incentive because you then have people not wanting to do useful work because it's just too profitable getting the proof of capacity effectively. So
100%.
anyways, and so to answer your question, we do a stake instead of the fisherman concept. There's a stake reward stake. So every single CPU requires basically $200 per core, $12,000 in FLT per CPU. And then for that, you're rewarded about $600 in FLT per month. And that's split between a delegator and the actual compute provider based on what the market is. So very different models and very different attempts to solve similar problems. And so it's fascinating to kind of see how all these things play out.
100%. There's no perfect answer. I think, and you touched on it with your kind of stake mechanism, right? There's no perfect answer, but you know what the wrong answer is. And the wrong answer is bad actors come in, right? Because rewards are high and then the rewards aren't high anymore and then they leave, right? That's kind of what you don't want. You want people to come in because they believe in your ecosystem, it makes sense to them, and they understand what their rewards will be a week from now, a month from now, 6 months from now, right? And I think that's what you guys have done really well. That's what we're trying to do. I think it's also something that I think people often don't understand, right? They say, why wouldn't you just like throw your token at people and get, tens of thousands of GPUs into your network as quickly as possible, or CPUs on your side? Why wouldn't you just want to be the biggest as quickly as you can? And it's because you're screwing yourself long term.
I mean, definitely the case. And you touched on this, but for us in particular, we also think about the duration of rewards, right? They don't exist they can't be paid out forever. So we want useful to compute to join the network. For us, useful compute's paid in fiat. It's basically a decision between a provider who makes an offer for a compute job. They're paid in fiat. They're not paid that, and they go off the token, right? And so that becomes a question as to, do they price that really low because they want the fiat right away as opposed to vesting, or they really want the Fluence token, so they price it high? And I think there'll be a marketplace of ideas or marketplace on that as well. We will see. We also are conscious, like you said, of growing supply in advance of demand, but not 20xing it, because that is, and as you also know, you've got different uses, different toolings required. Talk about, I guess, your guys' background, because there's a lot of gaming backgrounds, obviously interesting. And I think that's some of the uses you're talking about. And I'm kind of curious how gaming kind of applies to your ecosystem.
Yeah. So all of me and my founder, we actually met. I lived in Beijing, right, for 7 years. I've got a long story short, started in kind of infrastructure, but in oil and gas and power, right, building big projects in remote places. Did it for about 6 years, 6 or 7 years before founding my first company. It was a biotech company. Developed a couple of sensors that had medical applications. And I moved to China to get closer to factories, reduce the iteration cycle on these sensors, raised some more money, worked on it for a couple of years. But long story short, after exiting that, realized that I just missed infrastructure. And being in China, there was just, some of the biggest infrastructure jobs like in the world happening. And something that I was really fascinated by was the cloud ecosystems, which were developing in China at the time, right? There was some really, really cool cloud gaming networks deploying in China, different to kind of the Stadias and others that we were seeing in the West, right? Because these were very mobile focused, right? It was like mobile cloud. So a kind of a cool and very different thing. Anyway, I joined a small team that was working on some kind of scalability and performance-based work in that space, and realized that there was a pretty interesting opportunity to address some of those challenges if we looked at things through the lens of a decentralized network. And this was kind of the genesis of Aether, right? We spun Aether up about 6 months later. Long story short, Aether started as and we still do this, right? This is still core to our business, right? But we started as a decentralized cloud gaming company, right? So we were building a decentralized GPU cloud, but the customer for that GPU cloud was gaming companies, right? And this was really cool. There was, there's roughly like 3.3 billion gamers out there, right? 2 point something of them are all gaming on low-end devices, right? The vast majority of gamers access gaming content through low-end devices. And funnily enough, like the flip side of that reality is that the biggest gaming companies in the world can't really access those users, right? There's kind of the barrier goes two ways. And when or at least when I thought about that problem, right, I kind of looked and I was like, what's going to change here? What are these kind of status quo shifts that could result in us accessing those 2.8 billion gamers or giving these big companies in the West and big companies in Asia that produce these great games access to those customers, right? And I kind of narrowed it down to three, two quite unrealistic and then one realistic solution, right? The first was, you raise the GDP in these regions and everyone has more money, and now all of a sudden they can buy a fancy phone or a gaming PC, right? Highly unlikely. Second, there's some form of kind of quantum leap in chipset technology, and all of a sudden we can produce really powerful chips for very, very cheaply, and everyone has access to kind of powerful kind of CPUs and GPUs in whatever device they own, right? Also incredibly unlikely, not just technically, but also kind of from a human nature perspective. We'd still screw people even if everything was super cheap, right? And then finally, there was take this technology we already have that abstracts away the hardware requirement of a user, right? And just figure out how to scale it better, right? That's all we need to do. Technology is already there. We just need to figure out how to scale it better. And that's what Aether started doing, right? And we're still doing that today. So all of our kind of GPU networks that we're building for the first kind of year were all gaming GPU clouds, primarily focused on being able to scale through Southeast Asia, through Latin America, right? Through parts of the world where Google Stadia could never touch because their infrastructure was too expensive, right? But where we knew the infrastructure would have the most value. And along the journey there, I think it became clear to us, like it would appear very clear to you in retrospect. It became clear to us that this GPU network we were building had a huge amount of relevance for AI as well. So we started to kind of pull products and push products out that serve that sector as well. So now we have kind of four key product sectors, I guess you'd call them. One is AI training, right? So we have some of the biggest kind of AI companies in the world, Web 2 and Web 3 companies, doing large language model training runs on our H100s. We have AI inferencing, which is another kind of category of product, right? And again, for those that don't know, inferencing is the name for AI doing its job, right? So if you ask ChatGPT a question and it goes and it queries its model and gives you an answer, that's called inferencing. So AI applications and AI agents and things like that, most B2C AI products are all just inferencing. So we have a number of big customers that kind of use that product line. And those are our two kind of AI products. And there's, some variation amongst how we serve customers in that space. And then we have the gaming side, which is kind of cloud gaming. And in there we have mobile cloud gaming, PC cloud gaming, and also cloud publishing, which is quite cool. This is where you can inject cloud gaming into the publishing experience, right? So for example, instead of Call of Duty popping up on your phone and just seeing a trailer, right? It'll be like, oh, would you like to test this game out for 10 minutes? And you click it and you're in the game straight away. No no need to download, no need to install, no need to have a fancy computer. You can literally test the game instantly, right? So it's a total revolution in how we kind of connect and experience content. And then we have this more corporate offer that's kind of on the back of that cloud gaming infrastructure, which is, we call it virtual compute. And you can think of that as like virtual machines, cloud phones, other kind of corporate solutions. We have a number of big kind of telcos and stuff that purchase that type of compute from us.
So what I find interesting is terrific is you started off with the use case in mind. That is highly, there's a lot of things unusual about Aether, but in terms of Web3, that is definitely up there in terms of unusualness. That's how you're supposed to start companies. So that's super interesting. And obviously things evolve over time, right? So that's the market talks and you respond. So, but it's interesting to start with that in mind. Question I have for you is you talked about products, but you earlier referred to Aether as a marketplace. Marketplace is one thing and one level of complexity. Offering products is a whole nother level of complexity and development. Can you talk a little bit about what that means in terms of products? Because I think that is another big differentiator versus potentially just a pure marketplace.
Yeah, I think it's funny because if I was to describe Aether as what we really are, which is like essentially infrastructure as a service with a product as a service layer and eventually kind of a software as a service layer, right? You would understand it, right? But I think most of the people listening would not, right? So I do use these terms like marketplace. I try and explain things through the idea of a menu, but in many ways we're not, right? We are infrastructure first, but we do have some products, right? At the moment, there is really only one. I guess let me take a step back. If you're talking about products that we offer to customers, they're effectively just packaged forms of our infrastructure, right? So where we take infrastructure that again is being provided by others within our network, and we put a lens over it so people understand how that can be used, right? And then we market it and we put it in front of the right customers, and we kind of it would be great if we could just build it and kind of say, let them come. That would be amazing, but we can't do that. We have BD, we have sales, we have people out there actively kind of selling the infrastructure that we don't own, but that is within our network. And we put those into packages and into products, right, that we then sell to our customers. This, like Aether Edge, that's not kind of like that's actually a product, right? That's like a physical thing. And that's the only kind of thing that you can buy. Like previously you could you could buy into the node sale, right? But the node sale's closed now. So that was a product you could get access to. Technically this box, it's Aether Edge, but it's kind of done in the same way that Helium was done, right? So we have like authorized manufacturers that can choose to manufacture this box, right? And then they can distribute them through the Aether Edge portal, right? So actually Aether itself doesn't own these boxes either, right? We're a fully kind of decentralized network, but we have this kind of like almost franchise manufacturing model that allows people to come in and purchase these and then provide them to our network through our portals, which is really cool.
Well, listen, I want to talk about Aether Edge, but before that, I think what's important is most DePIN projects have lots of supply, and the demand is somewhat of the issue. And what you guys have obviously realized from the beginning is you need to have a focused, dedicated BD effort and productize a bunch of your offerings. Just putting a marketplace out there isn't sufficient. And that is, comes from your, I think, background in real infrastructure development and at large companies to realize what's necessary. But I think that is an important element that I think a lot of people in DePIN are discovering a little bit the hard way. Is the market is as valuable as your product is, you have to be out there selling it and talking to customers to get adoption. And it takes some level of productization, whether it is the full thing, a point and one click is one level, or whether it is just a make it easier to understand, to use at some sort of multi-click or multi-stage integration required. But that is, I think, a key piece. You mentioned multiple customers. I think there are plenty of enterprises or plenty of projects that are farther advanced than you, have less customer adoption, which is important. I just want to make that comment because I think that's instructive for a lot of
Thank
people in
you.
DePIN differentiator. Let's talk about Aether Edge for a second. How big do you expect that to be? How many boxes have been sold? How many do you expect to deploy? And what's the role in the network for you?
Yeah, so we're ramping up manufacturing now, right? So we've been pretty selective with the number of devices that we've released. We've done three, essentially 2,000 unit private sales, right, or semi-public, right? You go through a process to get access to the sale. So 6,000 odd have been sold so far. Another sale, I think, might even be happening today, right? But this will essentially be the last small sale, right? I think that you'll see a large amount of these devices coming out in the near future. I would like hundreds of thousands of these devices to be out there. This will be, think helium, right? Think a map, and you're just seeing these things just like populate all over the world. That's a dream. I'd love to kind of replicate the excitement that was in the helium ecosystem early on.
And how much do they cost? And what do you think the reward return is?
Yeah. So you can check this out all on the Aether Edge website. So it's myedge.io, right? So you can go there. It's really clear. Actually, like, breakdown of rewards is kind of the first thing under the title, right? And it's actually live information too. So it's really cool to check out. I definitely recommend you go and have a look. Essentially, one box is like $9.99, so just under $1,000, right? You get this, you won't regret it. You can check out the rewards on the My Edge website. But we have people already that I'm getting photos. I don't know how they've done it, where they've bought it like off market or through secondaries or something. And it's just like they've got, 60 of these machines plugged into their house. One guy was sending me a message. He messaged me and he's like, I've got 15 of these in my dining room. His wife was not very happy.
I was going to say that is not that is not conducive to the happy home life potentially. My wife got annoyed at at a couple of helium boxes around. Annoyed my wife a little bit, so I'm familiar with with that exercise. What any advice you have for founders in the space? This has been a path. It sounds like you guys have built this relatively quickly. But anything didn't go right? Any things you've had to lessons learned? What would you take away from where you are right now?
I think my advice that I give to founders is in some ways counter to the advice that I hear from kind of VCs, right? VCs are very kind of raise money when you need it, right? Have a plan and execute well on that plan and only kind of do X and Y if Z is ready or whatever, right? But that's like kind of like advice for regular markets, I feel, right? Regular markets don't have a kind of a bull and a bear market, right? They don't have these windows that are so critical to your success, right? So my advice to founders, and I have to remember to take this advice, to be fair. Actually, I'm reflecting on a conversation I had today where I need to take this advice. But make hay when the sun shines, right? You have these windows of opportunity where maybe you're lucky and narrative is on your side, right? Or maybe you're lucky and there's narrative adjacent to what you're doing and you can become relevant, right? Or you can kind of push to get a product out or get your token out, like, or do a raise, right? Earlier than maybe you'd planned, earlier than you'd told anyone that you'd intended to do, right? But you have the opportunity to do it. And I would say just execute 3 to 5 times faster than you would ever kind of imagine you would need to, because the bull market doesn't last, right? And then you'll be sitting there for another kind of year and a half, just wishing you'd ignored the VC and fucking raised some money when you had the chance, because that's how you survive. So yeah, just trust your gut and just go move quickly, because the bull market won't last.
Fair enough. I think that's a terrific advice. We obviously, I hope it will. And these days, it's hard to tell what's a bull and what's a bear when you've got these disconnects of tokens. But certainly appreciate that. Talk about DePIN overall, and listen, your views on DePIN, and also you're based in Singapore. I think you see a different kind of universe of DePIN projects potentially than I do, at least based in Amsterdam. What any DePIN projects that you like and want to call people's attention to? Anything on the sector overall you think is interesting?
Yeah, I think a question that people ask quite a lot is like, why is DePIN pumping? Like, why is DePIN a relevant narrative this cycle? And I've got an opinion on that, right? And it's pretty much based around the fact that over last cycle, right, and into this cycle, you've been seeing more capital accrue to crypto VCs than kind of ever before, right? They've had more dry powder than they've ever had before, right? And big projects, right? The projects that would usually be a 10, 100, 1,000x opportunity for the community, they're staying private longer, right? They're raising much later rounds. You're seeing these big tier one VCs raise $250 million rounds in crypto. Like, this was never a thing before, right? And you're seeing this disconnect between what retail and what kind of the philosophy of Web3 has always been about, right? And retail's ability to kind of gain anything from the ecosystem, right? They're being excluded, right? And that's why meme coins are pumping. Meme coins are pumping because they're not VC vessels, right? They're not controlled by VCs. People look at it and they think, okay, a meme coin has the chance to pump, and it can hit 1,000 because I'm in early and there's no one kind of taking all of the juice out of this sale right before it goes to market. And I think DePIN plays a really critical role in this space because DePIN's about participation, right? Largely, when you look at, I guess, the DePIN ecosystem as a whole, largely DePIN's something that the average retail user can get involved with, right? And earn tokens, right? If I buy an Aether Edge, I'm not buying an Aether Edge after a VC's totally drained it, If I'm like buying a weather device, from one of those, there's a really cool weather XM, is it?
Yeah, weather XM, exactly.
Yeah, like if I'm buying one of those, like that device hasn't had, a VC drain all the tokens out of it, right? I think DePIN has this really cool participatory space, and it's kind of a safe space within crypto. And I think people really appreciate that about DePIN, and I think it plays to this financial nihilism sort of like mindset that people have, where it's just a lot harder today than it was even last cycle for people to make money in crypto.
Well, listen, I think that's definitely true. Agree fully with it. And I'd also say that it's much easier to understand. It's far easier to understand. Like, I buy this Weather XM device. I now am getting weather and I'm being paid for it. I buy the Aether Edge box. I plug it in. I'm doing this. Do the Helium box. I plug it in, right. I put, Demo in my car, right. Each one of these things, are the physicality makes the comprehension much easier, and also makes the return, the link to being paid, so much simpler than traditional or earlier crypto.
And it's core, right? That's what Bitcoin was, right? You knew you could plug your machine in, right? And you could buy Bitcoin. Maybe it's not as simple as buying a box and like plug and play, but it's still simple. People understood that if they did work, right, they would get a reward, and they had direct access to the source. You know what I mean? It wasn't through all of these other different intermediaries and cycles before they got a taste. So I think you're right. It's easy for people to understand because we've had so much familiarity with it over time.
Well, listen, give us last question, or second to last question here. Tell people, how big can Aether be? How big? What's your vision for this, right? In terms of any metric you choose, in terms of devices on the network, revenue flowing through it. How do you think about potential scale here?
I think it's a difficult question to answer, right? But I think when you look at a DePIN in the compute space, I think all of us tend to have this same future state idea, right? And that is that at some point, maybe 5 years, 10 years from now, right? It is as easy to connect your compute to a network as it is for a device that you have today to connect to the internet, right? The ability for the compute that I own to just be plugged into this global compute mesh, right, is just almost inbuilt into the devices that we have, right? And then the ability to kind of fractionalize off compute to a local requirement, right, and earn rewards as a result of that, or to contribute to kind of a broader supercompute ecosystem doing really kind of broad and powerful tasks, right? All of this, I think, is something that DePIN in particular and hopefully Aether is kind of building us towards, right? So I think, when I look at like the ability of a centralized solution to kind of achieve something like that, I don't think that's how it's going to go, right? I think this ability for compute to kind of plug into this kind of infrastructure that allows you to do massive kind of, and also hyper-specific fractionalized compute tasks, that's something that DePIN's going to solve. And I think, Aether is going to be, and Fluence, we're going to be the guys that are solving it.
Listen, I hope so. And I think that the benefit to that also is the decentralization potential that is helpful. Besides saving cost, you also reduce single points of failure, reduce censorship, censorship resistant. You're a whole lot of attributes besides this. And cost is, I guess, the lost leader in a way, or the leader for you guys for sure, as I hope it is with Fluence. But agreed in terms of that future, no doubt. And also allows independent data centers, independent providers to actually contribute profitably, which is their real risk of being squeezed out by the hyperscalers right now. And I think we all benefit from a more diverse group of contributors to frankly, any type of network, whether it's compute or otherwise.
Totally agree. 100%.
So listen, how do, last question, where do you think, you mentioned Bitcoin, Bitcoin's obviously key here. Where do you think Bitcoin is end of the year? Any predictions?
100K. We're hitting Bitcoin 100K this cycle.
I think so too. No, I definitely think so. Agreed there. And so let's talk about on Aether, appreciate you being on. How do you follow Aether? How do you follow Mark? How do you stay in touch? How do you buy Aether Edge? Where's the auction or the purchase? Help to give us all the ways to engage, follow, and participate.
Cool. So definitely we're very active on Twitter, right? So if you want to stay up to date on everything that's happening, follow us on Twitter. The Aether Twitter handle is Aether. It's at Aether Cloud, right? That's our main Twitter handle. If you want to check out all of the ecosystem projects that Aether's partnered with, we do some really cool stuff. There's another handle that we have called Aether Eco. So just Aether ECO. If you want to follow me and get maybe a founder insight into kind of what's happening, it's just MRRYDON. So it's MR and then my last name, which is Rydon, RYDON. So Mr. Rydon, depending on how you choose to read it. And if you want access to the Edge, check out myedge.io. All the links, all the information, whether you're looking for returns or not to return the device because you won't, you'll love it. I mean, ROI, right? If you're looking for how much return on your investment you'll get, like all of that information's there on the website, and information to the latest sales. If you're interested in being a distributor, you can also go there. So definitely check it out. They're super cool.
myedge.io. That's an easy URL to remember. Terrific. Well, listen, Mark, thanks for being on. Terrific. And congrats on all the success, a successful launch. And, I will, we'll be seeing each other in Brussels and many other places. So look forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for having me. Congrats on your success too. Looking forward to hanging out in Brussels.